The morning we buried my wife, I held it together, I don't know how. 63 years of living and I still don't understand how a man can stand at a graveside in January, watch them lower the woman he loved for 31 years into frozen Georgia clay, shake hands with people whose names he can't remember, and still drive himself home without running a single red light. But I did. I made the turn onto Birchwood Lane, pulled into the garage, sat in the dark for 11 minutes. I remember checking the clock twice, and then I went inside and washed the coffee cups that had been sitting in the sink since Tuesday. My daughter called that evening. She asked if I needed her to come over. I told her no, I was fine, I was just tired. She didn't push, that's her way. I was not fine. My wife's name was Loretta. She was 59 years old when the cancer took her, and she had been fighting it quietly, the way she did everything, for 14 months before she told anyone except me. She didn't want to worry people. She didn't want casseroles showing up at the door and women from the church patting her hand and looking at her like she was already gone. She said, "Len, I am going to fight this thing in peace and I would appreciate it if you would let me." So I let her, and I kept her secret, and I drove her to Northside Hospital every Thursday for treatment, and I sat in that beige waiting room reading old Sports Illustrated magazines, and I prayed very quietly in the way my mother taught me, which is not with a lot of words. She fought hard. She just didn't win. 3 days after the funeral, on a Thursday, her treatment day, which I had not yet adjusted to not having, the phone rang at 9:30 in the morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I had stopped drinking. The caller ID said Hargrove, Baxter and Mills. I didn't recognize it. I almost didn't pick up. Mr. Whitfield, a man's voice, young, careful, professional in the way that makes you sit up slightly without knowing why. "Yes," I said. "This is Daniel Pruitt. I'm a paralegal at Hargrove, Baxter and Mills. We're an estate law firm in Buckhead. I'm calling regarding your wife, Loretta Ann Whitfield." A pause. "I'm very sorry for your loss, sir." I told him thank you and waited. "Mr. Whitfield, I need to speak with you in person. There are some documents related to your wife's estate that require your attention. Some things have come to our attention that I think you need to be aware of before we proceed." Another pause, shorter this time. "I'd prefer not to discuss the details over the phone." I asked him what kind of things. "Sir, I think it would be better if you came in. Are you available tomorrow morning?" I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my side of the bed. I had not yet moved to the center. I wasn't ready for that, and I stared at the ceiling and I tried to imagine what a paralegal at an estate law firm in Buckhead could possibly need to tell me about Loretta that I didn't already know. We didn't have complicated finances. I had retired from the Postal Service in 2019 after 32 years. We had the house, which was paid off, a joint savings account, her teacher's pension from DeKalb County Schools, and a life insurance policy through her union. I knew where everything was. Loretta was organized. She kept a binder in the filing cabinet in the spare bedroom, color-coded, tabbed, updated every January like clockwork. The office was on the 14th floor of a glass building off Peachtree Road. Daniel Pruitt met me in the lobby. He was maybe 30, dark suit, the kind of firm handshake that tells you someone taught him to do it. He brought me back to a small conference room and set a folder on the table between us and folded his hands on top of it. "Whitfield," he said, "I want to be straightforward with you, because I think you deserve that." He glanced down at the folder, then back up. "Are you aware that your wife had a separate account?" I told him I didn't know what he was talking about. He opened the folder, pushed a single page toward me. It was a bank statement, a savings account at a credit union in Decatur I had never heard of, in Loretta's name only. The balance was $47,000. I sat very still for a moment. I asked him when it was opened. 8 years ago, he said. He gave me a moment with that, $47,000. 8 years. Loretta had been putting money away quietly in an account I did not know about for 8 years. "There's more," he said. He didn't look like he wanted to say it. "About 6 weeks before she passed, Mrs. Whitfield came into our office and changed the beneficiary on this account." He paused. "She removed your name." I looked at him. "The new beneficiary," he said, "is your son-in-law. I have one daughter. Her name is Becca. She is 34 and she teaches 2nd grade, and she is the best thing Loretta and I ever did. She has been married for 6 years to a man named Troy. And even now, writing that name makes something tighten in my chest. Troy Alderman. He sells software to hospitals. He is handsome in the way that makes you think he knows it. He calls me Len even though I never asked him to." I drove home from that office and I sat in the same chair at the kitchen table and I looked at my hands for a long time. My first thought was not anger. My first thought was that it must be a mistake. Loretta loved me. I knew she loved me. 31 years of mornings and arguments and silences and Sunday drives and hospital waiting rooms. A woman does not accumulate that kind of history with a man and then quietly redirect $47,000 to his son-in-law 6 weeks before she dies. There had to be an explanation. There had to be something I was missing. My second thought was that I needed to find out what that something was. I went to the filing cabinet in the spare bedroom. I opened the binder, cream-colored, with little yellow index tabs. Everything was there. The insurance policy, the pension documents, the deed to the house, our tax returns going back to 2009. But tucked behind the last tab, the one labeled miscellaneous, there was an envelope I had never seen before. My name was written on the front in Loretta's handwriting. The letters were smaller than usual, less certain. She had been very weak by then. I sat on the edge of the bed and I held it for a while before I opened it. The letter was 4 pages long, her handwriting, shaky in places but still hers. I am not going to put all of it here because some of it belongs only to me, but I will tell you what it contained, because you need to understand what I learned. Loretta had suspected something was wrong long before she got sick. It started 4 years ago, she wrote. Small things. Money in their account that she couldn't trace to any paycheck. Troy dismissing questions. Becca getting quiet when Loretta asked about their finances. Then one afternoon Loretta had driven to Becca's house to drop off a birthday gift and let herself in with the spare key. She had done it 100 times and she had overheard a phone call. Troy in the kitchen, voice low. She caught fragments. An amount. A date. A name she didn't recognize. She stood in the hallway and listened until she heard him hang up, and then she slipped back out the front door without saying a word. She started keeping notes. Loretta taught school for 28 years. She was not a suspicious woman by nature, but she was methodical. Dates and amounts and things she noticed. She even wrote down the name she had heard on that phone call, a woman named Denise, with a question mark beside it. When she got the diagnosis, she said her very first thought, before fear, before grief, was Becca. What would Becca have when she was gone? And more than that, what was Becca being kept from knowing? She opened the account because she did not know what else to do. She put in a little from her pension every month, more when she could. She changed the beneficiary to Troy, she explained, not because she trusted him, but because she needed him not to suspect anything. She knew she was running out of time. She wanted the money to reach Becca eventually, through him, but more than that, she wanted me to find the letter first. She wanted me to find the letter and then find the truth, and then decide what to do with it. You were always the patient one, she wrote. I was always the one who acted too fast. Please be patient, please be careful. Please don't let Becca lose anything more than she already has. I read that letter 3 times. Then I put it back in the envelope and I put the envelope in the inside pocket of my winter coat, where I keep things I need to remember I have. I did not call Troy. I did not call Becca. I went to bed and I lay there in the dark and I thought about the name Loretta had written down. Denise. I am 63 years old and I spent 32 years as a mail carrier in a suburban Atlanta zip code where I knew every street and every name on every box. I am not a detective, but I know how to be thorough and I know how to be quiet. And I know that most people, when they are doing something they shouldn't, leave more of a trail than they think. It took me 11 days. Troy's company used to leave his work calendar synced to a shared tablet he and Becca kept in the kitchen. I had seen them check it when we had dinner there. The next time I visited, I offered to make the coffee while Becca took a call from a friend. I had 3 minutes with that tablet. I wrote down 4 names from his schedule I didn't recognize and took photographs of 2 email previews that had come through before I found what I was looking for. A calendar entry, repeated every other Thursday, DL Consulting, at an address in Sandy Springs. 2 days later, I drove to that address. It was a mid-rise condominium building. I parked across the street in a CVS parking lot and I waited because I am a patient man and because I had nothing else to do with my time that mattered more than this. At 4:17 in the afternoon, Troy walked out of that building with a woman. She was younger than Becca by at least a decade. They stood on the sidewalk and she said something to him and he laughed. And the way he laughed told me everything I had not wanted to know. I took photographs. I am not proud of it, but I took them. I went home. I ate a bowl of cereal for dinner because I didn't feel like cooking. I thought about Loretta lying in that hospital bed for 40 months, organizing everything, protecting everyone, writing me a 4-page letter with shaking hands so that I would know what to do after she was gone. I thought about Becca teaching 2nd grade and driving home to a man who was driving to Sandy Springs every other Thursday. I thought about $47,000 sitting in a credit union account in Decatur. I called a real attorney, not the estate paralegal, a different one, a woman named Patricia. I stopped myself. I cannot use that name, a woman attorney. referred to me by a man I used to deliver mail to for 15 years, now retired, whose son had gone through a difficult divorce and came out the other side intact. She reviewed everything I had. She explained what it meant. In Georgia, she said, evidence of marital infidelity can affect the division of assets in a divorce proceeding. $47,000 in a separate account, opened in anticipation of this situation, beneficiary changed with deliberate intent. That was now legally part of Becca's picture. Your wife was protecting your daughter, she told me. She just needed you to finish what she started. I want to be honest about what the next part cost me. I had to sit across from my daughter and tell her things that would break her heart. I had decided I would not do it in pieces, I would not soften it. Because Loretta had spent 14 months softening things and protecting people, and I thought Becca deserved the full truth delivered by someone who loved her completely. So I went to her house on a Saturday morning when I knew Troy had a sales conference in Charlotte. I brought coffee and the kind of almond pastries from the bakery on Claremont that she has loved since she was 9 years old. She knew something was wrong when she saw my face. I told her about the letter. I showed it to her, not all of it, the parts that were just between Loretta and me I read to myself and skipped over, and Becca understood without asking. I told her about the account. I told her about Sandy Springs. I put the photographs on the table face down and I told her what they were before I turned them over, so she could decide if she wanted to see them. She looked at them for a long time without saying anything. Then she said, "How long did Mom know?" I told her about the phone call 4 years ago. She sat with that the way you sit with something very heavy when you realize you have to carry it either way. Then she looked at me and she said, "She never said a word. She didn't want to hurt you with something she wasn't sure about yet," I said. "You know how she was." Becca said quietly, "Yeah, I know how she was." We cried together then, for Loretta mostly, for the woman who had spent her last 14 months worried about her daughter's future instead of asking anyone to worry about hers. My son-in-law came home from Charlotte on a Sunday evening and found the locks changed and a letter from Becca's attorney on the front step. What followed was not quick and it was not clean. I will not pretend it was satisfying in the way you want these things to be satisfying. Divorce proceedings take time. Attorneys speak carefully. There are motions and responses and waiting and more waiting. Troy hired a lawyer who immediately tried to argue that the separate account constituted a planned attempt to conceal marital assets, which was so audacious given his own conduct that even the judge appeared unimpressed. The photographs helped. The calendar entries helped. Loretta's letter, submitted as evidence of the timeline, helped most of all. I was in the courtroom the day the settlement was finalized. I sat in the third row. Troy sat at his table and did not look at me. His attorney was very good and managed to negotiate terms that probably felt to Troy like less of a loss than they actually were. Becca received the equity in the house, the retirement accounts. $47,000 in a credit union account in Decatur, interest included by then. And there is one more thing. This is the part I turn over in my mind the most. 6 weeks before she changed the beneficiary, Loretta had also drafted a new document with Hargrove, Baxter and Mills, the reason they called me in the first place. It was a separate directive outside the will, a personal letter filed with the firm to be disclosed to me after her death. That letter contained, in Loretta's handwriting, a single additional name. Hargrove, Baxter and Mills had already verified that the woman named Denise had a business registered in her name, a small event planning company, and that Troy Alderman was listed as a silent financial partner. Troy had been funneling money from his company's expense accounts into that business for at least 3 years. That information went to a different attorney, a different kind of attorney. The kind that files things with the Georgia Secretary of State's office and coordinates with people who have CPA licenses. That process is still ongoing. I am told that it is proceeding well. I want to be careful about what I say it feels like. I don't want to say it feels good because too much of it is built on grief. My wife is still gone. My daughter is still starting over at 34. Those things do not resolve the way a legal case resolves. But here is what I can say. Becca comes over for dinner on Thursdays now. She brings dessert, usually something from that bakery on Claremont. We sit at the kitchen table where I sat that morning with the untouched coffee and the phone call I almost didn't answer, and we talk about ordinary things. Her students. The garden I have been trying to learn how to keep up, because it was always Loretta's garden and I don't want to let it go. The fact that the old dog we have had for 9 years now sleeps on what used to be Loretta's side of the bed and I cannot bring myself to move him. Small things, true things. One Thursday, maybe 2 months ago, Becca was washing up after dinner, and she went quiet for a moment, and then she said without turning around, she knew exactly what she was doing, didn't she? It wasn't really a question. Yes, I said, she did. Becca nodded slowly, still looking out the window over the sink. I've been thinking, she said, that maybe she was more like you than I ever realized. I thought about that. About Loretta in the hallway of her daughter's house, perfectly still, listening. About 14 months of color-coded binders and quiet phone calls, and a 4-page letter written with shaking hands. About $47,000 set aside one careful deposit at a time. No, I said. She was always better at it than I am. Becca laughed. Actually laughed, the way she used to, and the sound of it moved through that kitchen like something returning from a long way off. I don't know if I'm finished grieving. I think you don't finish. I think you just slowly build a life around the shape of the person who's gone, the same way a tree grows around an old fence post. Until one day you realize the two things have become one thing and you can't quite say where the grief ends and the ordinary living begins. Loretta knew what she was doing, she always did.